Hello and welcome back. So in the last video we looked at how we could set up the VirtualBox environment to run our Linux Mint operating system with the various Scala tools on it. In this video we're going to start utilizing the command line. Now Linux Mint has a GUI, and so you can double click on things and see them in much the same way that you are used to seeing them. However, we're going to spend a lot of our time not working through the GUI, which is what you are most likely familiar with and comfortable with. Instead, we're going to work through a command line interface. And often people will start off wondering, why would I want to do that? What is the value of having a command line interface? And hopefully over the course of working through this book you will see some of the benefits of this in your own work. But a few things can be described early on. One of the advantages of the command line environment that we will see in just a minute is the fact that you can provide multiple arguments to a program when you run it. When you're on a point and click type of environment, you basically get to click on something and it runs. It gives a single bit of information that says go. You can't give it anything else in addition to that, and the command line lets you provide other things. Other situations are when either things are going wrong, or if you have to utilize a computer over a low bandwidth network connection or a very high latency internet connection. For example, I occasionally have to log into computers that are in other states. Well, bringing up Windows on computers that are in other states can be very slow and tedious. However, typing text in the command environment is perfectly fast and everything works wonderfully. So there are certain times when it helps. Also, if a computer is not behaving well, sometimes you'll have to reboot into a safe mode. And the safe mode, because that lower level mode, often the graphics won't be working, a lot of times the safe mode will be text only. And so there are just certain things that you can do if you know how to use the text only command line that you can't do nicely with a GUI. The expectation is not that you're going to start doing everything command line. You might, but that's not really the expectation. The goal is to have it so that you understand how to use the command line and can see some of the benefits of it, and will use it when it's reasonable. So I'm going to work in the terminal under the VirtualBox environment here because it should be exactly what you have. So everything that I do here is something that you can see as well, whereas if I were working in my normal user directory, there are a whole bunch of other files that aren't available to you. So one of the things about the command line, and this is a big difference from the GUI, with the GUI you understand I just click and it happens. With the command line you have to know a certain number of commands. Now there are lots and lots and lots of commands that are available, so many in fact that literally books have been written on them. Actually there are certain commands upon which books have been written just on a single command. What we want to do here is kind of give you an introduction to the command line, give you just enough commands so that you can get up and running and do the things that we want you to be able to do. A lot of times I have students ask me, are we going to have to memorize all of these things? And I really hate using the term memorization because of the fact that in many ways, no, you're not going to force feed these into your head. Instead, what's going to happen is you're going to use them. And as you use them repeatedly, you're going to remember things. We'll talk about how you can look stuff up when you don't remember it. But these are just a set of commands that can be useful to you. There are lots of others, and maybe you will find some of them, and you will decide that you like them and you use them a lot. And then they will become part of your normal repertoire. So we want to build up a certain set of things, not that you memorize, but that you have stored in your head and you know how to use. So we're going to start off with a command called pwd, and that stands for print working directory. So you saw when I clicked on this, it showed me my home directory with all of these things, this home is actually, sorry, clicked the wrong thing. This home is actually inside of a directory called /home/student. Now, I use the term directory here. When you see something like this, you typically think of these as folders. That is the name that has been given to them, for example, under Windows. But the original name for these things, something that could hold multiple files inside of it, was a directory. And because there are various commands like pwd, where the D stands for directory, I'm going to use that terminology. So we are in the directory home student. It's a standard under Linux for all of the users to have their own directory inside of /home. Also, if you're used to Windows, you might be familiar with things like C: and D: and whatnot, different drives that you have. Linux does not have that. Instead, all of the entire disk system is under /, and you can mount other drives at different points under /, but / is your home directory. Also note this is a regular /, normal division, as opposed to on a Windows device where if you were to use the command line and type in directories, you use a / to represent things. So pwd will tell you where you are in the directory structure. Turns out you don't use this command all that much. Most of the time you remember where you are, but if you ever happen to forget, this will show it to you. As we'll see in a bit, also the command prompt here can give you information about where you are. So now I want to find out what files are here. And so our second command that we want to talk about is ls, and that stands for list. And it displays all of the files that are in your current directory by default if you just type in ls. And so you'll see desktop, downloads, documents, Eclipse. Let's open this back up again, desktop, documents, downloads, Eclipse, etc. So everything that is here also happens to be listed here. Now, the thing about the command line that I mentioned is that you can provide additional information. So for example, I can tell ls to give me the ls of a different directory. Say I wanted to do a listing of /home. Okay, well, there's only one thing there. It's the account for student. Or maybe I want to do a listing inside of the directory Eclipse, and I can see everything that's inside of there. The standard ls gives you a short listing, so it only tells you the name of things. You can also see it color codes them so that the blue is directories, the black is normal files, the green is executable files. You can also get more information about the files by giving a different type of argument, an option. So -l tells ls to do a long listing. So if I do ls-l, I see the same set of files that I had with just the regular ls, desktop, documents, downloads, etc. But in addition to these, I see a lot of other information. Turns out when I am working in Linux, I almost never use the short listing. I pretty much always use the long listing. You'll wind up using whatever feels comfortable to you, whatever you like to see. The long listing gives you a number of pieces of information in addition to the name. So we'll come back and talk about this right here. These are permissions on files. This is the number of links to that file. This is the owner of the file, and since we happen to be logged in as student, that is what the owner. There are also things in Linux called groups, and every user gets their own group. This is the size in bytes. All of these things are directories, and they all happen to have 4K. And then this is the last day and time of modification. So this is when these files were were last modified. So you can see a number of different pieces of information from that. Now it turns out that this isn't really showing us all of the files that are there. You're probably familiar with the concept of hidden files. Most operating systems have the ability to store files that you don't want people to see by default. Normally these are files that most people probably shouldn't be playing with. It's one of the things that this is a file that you shouldn't touch unless you kind of know what you're doing. If you want to see all of the files in a directory, you can use a -a. So because I don't have an L, this is just a -a, I get the short listing again. And you can see there's a lot more than what I had with just ls. What's the difference? Well, you'll notice that everything that's new in here starts with a dot. That's the standard for Linux, is that any file name that starts with a dot is considered to be a hidden file. There are also two in here that are kind of special. The directory name dot is always defined, and it's always your current directory. So a longer way of just doing ls is to say ls of dot. That's the current directory. You can also use a dot dot, and this is the directory above your current one. So since we're in home student, if dot dot refers to just the home. Okay? And as we saw earlier, if we do an ls on /home, we get student. So from where we are right now, dot dot refers to the same thing as /home, because dot dot is one directory up from where we are. So this allows you to look into files. We can get and I should also point out that you can do something like this. So this does a listing that shows you all the files using the long format. And so here you can see all of the files that are in the user directory with their various permissions, their times of modifications, their sizes, etc. that are on here. They are still color-coded over here as well. So we're in a particular directory. In order to move from one directory to another, we use the command cd. cd stands for change directory. So we type in cd, and then we normally give it the name of the directory that we want to change into. So if I wanted to go up to home, I could cd into dot dot, and now if I do pwd, it says I'm in home. You can also see that my prompt here tells me that I am in home. If I cd back into student, I go back to my my directory. As a short notation, Linux typically represents your main directory with a tilde. I could go into one of these other files. So for example, the way that Scala is installed in here is part of the type-safe stack, and so we can go into that directory, and we can do a long listing and see everything that is inside of that directory. And then we can go back into our home directory. Let's go into here. I'll just show you what's in here. This is actually where the Scala files are. If you want to jump back to your home directory at any time, if you do cd and you don't give it any arguments whatsoever, you jump back to your home directory. Okay, so if you forget to put arguments, you'll just go back to your home. Otherwise, you should put the directory that you want to move into. Now, it's probably recommended that you keep things nice and organized. I'm sure that if you have files on your computer, you create multiple folders and store things in appropriate folders and keep them all organized. And if you don't, at a certain point you start regretting that because you have so many files you can't tell where anything is and things get lost. You should probably do the same thing here. So, for example, I might want to create a directory that I'm going to put all of my Scala programming in. The command to create a directory is mkdir, and let's say I call it mkdir using Scala. If you're taking a course, CS1 or whatever, you might want to give it a name that's fitting with that. And now if I do a listing, you can see using Scala is here, and the information that is associated with it. We can do a cd into using Scala. And because it's a new directory, it has nothing in it. Actually, if you do an AL, you can see there is the dot and the dot dot, because those are automatically defined. You can also remove directories. So if I were back here, I could do an rmdir of using Scala, and now it's gone. rmdir only removes empty directories. So if there were files in there, that would have failed. You have to delete all the contents of a directory before you can use rmdir. What about for moving files around or copying them? These are standard things that you will find yourself doing. The command for copying is just cp, and the way it works is you give it the name of the file. So I happen to know there is a file called eclipse.ini inside of the Eclipse directory. And let's say I wanted to copy that file into my current directory. Well, I would say dot for my current directory. We could type in /home/student, but dot is much easier to type in. And now you can see that we have that file there. In addition to copying, you can move a file. So by using copy, the original is still inside of the Eclipse directory, which is good because we need that there. But if I wanted it to be a different name, or if I wanted it to be in a different location, I could mv it. Mv is short for move, and I could change this to a highly descriptive name like stuff.ini. And now when we look, you can see there is this stuff.ini that's located there. So that gives us copying, the ability to move. Let's say I don't want that copy of that file anymore, so I'm going to remove it. rm stuff.ini, rm command removes things, and now it's gone. Something to note about the rm command. When you remove files under Linux, they are gone. Okay? The rm command does not place them in a nice trash can. If you use the GUI and you say to delete stuff, then the stuff you delete will typically go into the trash, and if you decide you want it back, you can pull it out. rm truly removes it. It's like when you empty, it's like putting in the trash and emptying the trash all at once. So you do need to be a little bit careful with what you do in that regard. Another thing that's worth mentioning, something called wildcards. So you can see here we have 3 directories that start with the letter D. What if I wanted to see only those? Well, the asterisk, which we typically read as star, is a wildcard on the command line that represents anything. So an ls of D star runs through and shows us the contents of desktop, documents, and downloads, which, as you can see, they are fairly empty. If we had put an A, you would get that, and if we put an AL, you would get the long listing for each of them. Over time, as the number of files that you have builds up, if you want to, for example, move a large number of files from one place to a different place, you can put star dot something or something star, and then give it a directory to move them into, and it will move a lot of them over at once. Sometimes you also want to see the contents of a file. So for example, we had that eclipse.ini file inside of here, and we might want to see what that file actually looks like. It's 279 bytes, so it's not a really big file. To look at the contents of a file, there are a number of commands that we can use. This is for just looking at, not for editing. We'll talk about how we can edit in a later video. But just for looking at, if the file isn't too long and you just want to print it, the command cat is short for catalog, and it will print out the file that you give it. So that file right there, as I said, is not too long, and it lists nicely with cat. However, if I were to cat out notice, Notice is 8.9K, which is a little bit longer. It spans multiple pages in here, and I can cat it and then scroll through it. But there are other commands for long things like that to give you a little bit more control. The next level up for more control, and this is one you probably actually won't use that much, is a command called more. More prints it out. If you hit enter, it allows you to go down one line at a time. If you hit spacebar, it allows you to go down a full screen at a time. But you can't move back up using more. You could also search for stuff using slash, and then you can hit Q to quit out. Instead of using more most of the time these days, you will use an alternate program called, or an alternate command called less. This is playing off the joke that less is more, because less does more than more does. So in less, I can use the arrow keys to move down, to move back up. I can use page down and page up to move around, and that way I can still use space and enter just like I could in more. But I also have the ability to move up in here. If I search for something like href, it will go to that, and I can hit N to move to the next one. Okay, so less gives you a fairly highly functional ability to look at a file, to go through it, and just see its contents. Once again, this isn't for editing. This is just for looking at the contents. Some last little helpers. You might have noticed that as I've been typing, words will suddenly pop into existence. And no, that is not just due to the compression on the video. That's actually happening because I am using something called tab completion. So at first, when you look at command line, you might think, well, this is for people who want to type a whole lot. Actually, most people who use command line, what they've done is they've figured out how to do it without typing a whole lot. And there are a number of helpful keys to doing this, one of which is tab completion. So if I am doing something in a particular directory, or if I have a file or a directory, for example, Eclipse, if I just type in EC and I hit tab, there's only one file in my current directory that starts off EC, and it's the Eclipse directory, and so it filled it all in for me. And if I hit EC again and hit tab, well, that says that didn't go anywhere. If I hit tab twice in rapid succession, oh wait, no, this is because I'm CDing it, sorry. Cat, Eclipse, EC, tab. Okay, it fills it out to that point. By the way, CD is, the tab completion is smart enough to know that you can only CD into directories. So I hit tab again, and it went to Eclipse, but it turns out there are multiple files that start with Eclipse. There's the eclipse.ini, which we've already looked at, but it didn't add the ini. And the reason is, if you hit tab twice, you can see there are two files. There's a regular Eclipse and there's eclipse.ini. So if I add a dot and I hit tab again, it'll fill it out the rest of the way. Tab completion is a wonderful thing, and you should get used to hitting tab frequently. And there are a number of reasons for this. It's not actually just to save you typing. The biggest thing is to prevent you from having typos. So for example, if I just type in D, okay, well, there are three options for that. If I type in DE, I can hit tab and get the rest. DOC gets me that. It would be very easy, for example, to leave off the S on downloads. And if you type it in by hand, you could wind up doing that. There will also occasionally be files that have really long file names. And having to type those in is not only annoying, but it's error prone. So tab completion will tell you whether or not you are doing the right thing. If a file doesn't exist, the tab completion won't spit it out. If it does exist, it will fill in as much of it as it can. If you hit it twice, it will show you what's there. So you really should get accustomed to using tab completion. It makes your life much easier. Linux also has a command history. So by hitting the up arrow, I can go back through the previous commands that I've done, and the down arrow will go back through them the other way. In addition, you can use Control-R to do a search for various commands. So if I type in cat, it says that the last thing that I actually executed that did cat, I did not execute this one. The last thing that I did was notice. And so now if I were to hit enter, it will try to print it out. Of course, I'm not in the directory that has notice.html, so it says that it can't find one. And then last off, kind of on the helpful hint side, is the command for finding out about commands. And it's called man. And man is short for manual. So you can see if you just type in man and hit enter, it'll ask you what you want the man page for. We saw, for example, that ls has a -a and a -l option. What other options are there? Well, if you do man ls, you get the man page for it. And so ls, list directory contents, it shows you that you say ls followed by, and the square brackets say that this is optional. So one more option, or 0 more options and 0 more files, because the files are also optional. And then it goes through and it lists all the different options for you. Okay, so the L and A are not the only options for ls. There are a lot of others. If you're not certain how to use man, you can man, and that will give you the different options for that. You can also use man to search. This is, if you're probably better off looking in the book for a lot of things, because unless you want a more complex command, because the man with a -k, so for example for file, what you'll see is I get a very long list. There are lots and lots of commands that have file as part of their description, and this spits out all of them. So that's our quick set of looking at the command line, understanding why you want to use it, some of the basic commands for moving around in directories. We talked about pwd, ls, cd, mkdir, and rmdir, cp, mv, and rm for copy, move, and remove, and then cat, more, and less for looking at the contents of a file. So that gives you some basic tools. I would actually recommend at this point you spend some time using ls and cd and whatnot to look around. Look around and see what is present inside of your main space here. There are quite a few directories in here. In addition, you could just go look at the top level and go look around at what's inside of Linux. While rm could screw things up, remember this is just a virtual disk. You can download another copy of the VDI and start back over right from square one without having lost anything. So that's it for this video, and we'll come back and look at some more commands next time.